The rain came down in sheets, blurring the neon glow of the diner's sign into a smear of red and blue. Inside, Clara sat alone at the counter, her hands trembling around a chipped coffee mug, the steam long gone. Her eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, darted to the door every time the bell jingled, her body tensing like a deer ready to bolt. The bruise on her cheek was faint but unmistakable, a shadow under the diner's flickering fluorescent lights. She'd tried to cover it with makeup, but the rain had washed it away, leaving her exposed, raw. Her thin jacket clung to her shoulders, soaked through, and her boots left muddy prints on the linoleum floor. The clock above the counter read 2:17 a.m., and the only other sound was the faint hum of a country song playing on the jukebox, something about losing love and finding it again. Clara didn't look up when the bell rang again, but her fingers tightened around the mug, her knuckles whitening. She whispered to herself, "Please, not him, not tonight." Her voice cracked, barely audible, a prayer swallowed by the storm outside. She was 58, but the weight of the last 20 years made her feel a decade older every insult, every shove, every late-night fight with her ex-husband Ray etched into her bones. She'd left him 3 months ago, moved to this small Indiana town to start over, but he'd found her again. His texts, his calls, his shadow lingering outside her apartment window, it was all too much. Tonight, she'd fled to this diner, the only place open, hoping the rain would hide her tracks. Then, a voice is soft, gravelly, like it belonged to someone who'd seen his own share of hard dayscut through the quiet. "Ma'am, you all right? Looks like you're carrying the weight of the world in that mug." Clara flinched, her eyes flicking up to meet the man standing a respectful distance away, leaning lightly on the counter. He was older, maybe mid-60s, with a face creased like worn leather, gray hair tucked under a faded baseball cap. His name tag read Earl, and his apron was stained with grease from the grill. He held a coffee pot in one hand, but his eyes held something else concern, steady and unintrusive, like he'd seen 100 lost souls pass through this diner and knew better than to push. Clara forced a smile, thin and unconvincing. "I'm fine, just needed somewhere to sit." Her voice wavered, and she looked back down, hoping he'd leave it at that, but Earl didn't move. Instead, he set the coffee pot down, reached under the counter, and slid a small plate toward her a slice of apple pie, warm, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting into the crust. "On the house," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Rainy nights like this, they're easier with pie." Clara's throat tightened. She hadn't eaten all day, too afraid to stop anywhere Ray might find her. The simple gesture, the warmth of the pie, the quiet kindness in Earl's eyes felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. She nodded, unable to speak, and picked up the fork with trembling fingers. Earl didn't hover. He busied himself wiping down the counter, giving her space, but Clara felt his presence like a steady hand on her shoulder. The pie was sweet, the crust flaky, and for a moment, it was enough to anchor her to this moment, this diner, this small act of grace. She took a shaky breath and said, "You didn't have to do that, thank you." Earl looked up, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Didn't have to, but I wanted to. My mama always said a slice of pie can fix a lot of what's broken, at least for a little while." His words were simple, but they carried weight, like he'd learned them the hard way. Clara managed a small laugh, the sound foreign to her own ears. "Your mama sounds like a wise woman." Earl nodded, leaning against the counter now, his hands folded. "She was. Gone now, but she'd have liked you. Said folks who come in on nights like this, they're usually running from something. Or looking for something." Clara's fork paused midair, her heart stuttering. She wanted to deny it, to say she was just passing through, but the truth was too heavy, and Earl's eyes were too kind. "I'm running," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "From someone who won't let me go." The words spilled out before she could stop them, raw and jagged, and she braced herself for pity or judgment. But Earl just nodded, like he'd heard it before, like he understood. "Sounds like you need a safe place tonight," he said. "This diner's open all night. You stay as long as you need." They talked, haltingly at first, the way strangers do when trust is a fragile thing. Clara told him bits and pieces Ray's temper, the way he'd show up at her new job, the way she'd stop sleeping, always waiting for the next knock at her door. Earl listened, not interrupting, just nodding now and then, his hands busy with a rag or a coffee cup. He shared his own story in return, not to one-up her, but to meet her where she was. He'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago, he said, and the diner was his refuge, the place where he could still feel useful, still make a difference. Folks come in here hurtin', he said, his voice soft. Sometimes all they need is someone to see 'em, really see 'em. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back, focusing on the warmth of the pie, the hum of the jukebox. Earl didn't push her to say more, but he stayed close, refilling her coffee, offering a shy smile when their eyes met. It was a small thing, but it felt like a bridge being built, plank by plank, between two people who'd both known loss. The bell jingled again, and Clara froze, her heart lurching as she turned toward the door. A young couple stumbled in, laughing, shaking rain from their coats, and she exhaled, her shoulders sagging. Earl noticed, his eyes narrowing slightly, not missing a thing. "He's been coming around, hasn't he?" he asked, his voice low, protective. Clara nodded, her fingers twisting the edge of her napkin. "He found my new address. I don't know how, I can't keep running." Earl was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad. He scribbled something, tore off the page, and slid it toward her. "This is my sister's number. She runs a women's shelter 2 towns over. They've got security, counselors, a safe place. You don't have to go tonight, but you can call her anytime." Clara stared at the paper, her vision blurring. It was just a phone number, a scrap of paper, but it felt like a key to a door she'd thought was locked forever. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Earl shrugged, his smile soft, almost sheepish. "'Cause I've been where you are not the same, but close enough, and someone helped me once. Figure it's my turn." The hours passed, the rain slowing to a drizzle, the diner quiet, except for the occasional clink of dishes. Clara felt something shift inside her, a small spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. Earl didn't promise to fix everything, didn't pretend he could, but his presence steady, unassuming made her believe, just for a moment, that she could start over. She told him about her childhood, about the Thanksgiving dinners her mother used to make, the way the whole family would crowd around a wobbly table, laughing over burnt rolls. Earl chuckled, sharing a story about his own family's county fair traditions, how his daughter used to beg for cotton candy until her face was sticky with pink sugar. The stories wove them closer, their voices soft, punctuated by pauses that felt natural, like they were sitting on that old porch swing together, swapping tales of simpler times. Clara felt a warmth she hadn't known in years, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. The turning point came just before dawn, as the first light of morning crept through the diner's windows, painting the counter in soft gold. Clara's phone buzzed, and she flinched, her heart racing as she saw Ray's name flash on the screen. Another message, another threat, promising he'd find her, that she'd never escape. Her hands shook, and the fear came rushing back, cold and sharp. Earl saw it, saw the way her face paled, and he moved closer, his voice steady as he said, "You don't have to face him alone, Clara. You've got people now." He gestured to the notepad, to the number he'd given her, and then, in a gesture so small it could have been missed, he reached out and rested his hand over hers, just for a moment. It was warm, calloused, grounding. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his eyes locked on hers, unwavering. "And you're not going back to that life. Not if I have anything to say about it." Something in his voice, in the quiet conviction of it, broke through the fog of her fear. She wasn't just a victim anymore. Not in this diner. Not with this man who'd given her pie and a phone number and a reason to believe in second chances. She nodded, tears spilling over now, not from fear, but from gratitude, from the weight of being seen. "I'll call," she whispered. "I promise." Earl walked her to her car as the rain stopped, the sky clearing to a soft pink. He stood by her door, his hands in his pockets, and said, "You need anything, you know where to find me." "This diner's always open, and so's my ear." Clara smiled, a real one this time, small but steady, like a flower pushing through cracked pavement. She drove away, the scrap of paper tucked in her pocket, and when she called Earl's sister later that day, she found a bed at the shelter, a counselor who listened, a community that wrapped her in safety. Months later, she'd come back to the diner, her shoulders straighter, her eyes brighter, and she'd hug Earl, telling him she'd gotten a restraining order, a new apartment, a fresh start. He'd just grin and slide her a slice of pie, saying, "Told you my mama was right about pie." And Clara would laugh, the sound full and free, a sound she hadn't heard in herself for years. Kindness doesn't have to be big to change a life. Sometimes it's a slice of pie, a quiet conversation, a phone number scribbled on a napkin. It's the moment someone sees you, really sees you, and says, "You're not alone." Clara found her safe place that night, not just in a shelter, but in the heart of a stranger who cared enough to listen. And maybe that's the real miracle of kindness. It doesn't just save you. It reminds you that you're worth saving. What's the kindest thing you've ever experienced? Share it in the comments below. Let's spread a little hope together. Disclaimer: this story is a fictional or dramatized narrative created for emotional inspiration and entertainment. While it reflects real human emotions, all characters, names, and events are fictional or modified for storytelling purposes. Some parts may use AI-generated voiceovers or scripts. This content fully complies with YouTube's community guidelines and monetization policies. Our goal is to inspire, not to mislead.